So I was actually anticipating that this was going to show up about 2 weeks from now. According to the original shipping, it was supposed to be arriving like the first week of March, and I got it in the last week of February. Okay, whatever. But anyways, not even 24 hours after I got this in the mail, I got a completely different package in the mail, this time from Eaglemoss. So the first of two items that appeared in the box was the Jeffries Concept Shuttle. If you're unfamiliar with this, don't worry, you're not alone in this matter because, to be quite honest, until 2020, I was unaware of it as well. I mean, surely Jeffries came up with a bunch of different concepts, and I had heard that the shuttle was in fact completely different. I just didn't realize how different it was until I found out about this in 2020. So let's crack on, shall we? So, as I understand the story, Matt Jeffries, who designed both the exterior and interior of the original Enterprise, and certainly other people worked on it, but his name is by far the highest on the list. Anyways, as I understand it, they did not have a shuttle actually physically in the original 1960s television series because they just didn't have the money and they didn't have the resources and they didn't have the time. So they had mentioned shuttles before, they just didn't use them. In fact, there's one episode in particular, I can't think of what it's called, where a shuttle would have been perfectly suited to use. It's like the transporters are down, so let's use a shuttle. But because they didn't have a budget, it was written into the episode, oh, the shuttle bay has been shut down for whatever reason, blah, 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 whatever. So that was the excuse that they had in the first season. But in the second season, they couldn't really avoid it, and eventually they needed. No, I take it back. I think they did have a shuttle appear in season one at some point. I don't know the release order of TOS, so forgive me. But, anyways, as I understand it, Jeffries came up with. I mean, obviously, he had to come up with a bunch of different shuttle concepts or whatever it is, and there was a finalized shuttle design. But because they didn't have the time, they didn't have the manpower, and they didn't have the resources, let alone money, the shuttle was just that Jeffries came up with was just far too elaborate. It was neat. There was no question about that. It's just they didn't have the time and they didn't have the resources necessary to make it. Whether it was, physically on a set where the actors could walk in and out of it, or whether it was like designing the models, that would be used for filming. Either way, they just didn't have the resources at the time in 1966 to be able to make the perfect shuttle that Jeffries had envisioned. So instead, what we ended up with was a box with some cardboard tubes on it. That's what we ended up with. That was the second best option because it's relatively simple. It's just a box. It's a very straight edges to it, and then just put a couple of tubes on it. Congratulations, you've done it. But I was curious to know what the original concept for that shuttle was supposed to have been. I mean, can you imagine there was an original hidden version of the shuttle that was not, that perfect little blocky little whatchamacallit. And so that is what this is. This is the original version of what had been envisioned, and holy smokes, that is so 1960s, I'm not going to lie. Yeah, it kind of looks like a tadpole, but I'm not going to lie, this is pretty sexy. And it fits perfectly with, like, this actually fits better. I'm in kind of in agreement with everybody else. This fits better with the vision of the original series than it does like just that blocky, boxy, now iconic. Like this should have been the iconic image of the shuttle, but no. What we got was the little box, and the name that's adorning it is a foreign name that I can't pronounce, and it's also way too small at this stage. So, but anyways, yes. Although looking at it from this angle, it's kind of Romulan bird of prey kind of look to it, now that I think about it. But anyways, this is what it was originally going to be. And how weird is it? Actually, I don't have it. I've got it sitting on the shelf now. But how weird is it that, like, in a 1 month period, I've gotten both one of the concepts for the USS Enterprise itself, and now I've got the concept for the original shuttle. Just bam, bam, one right after the other. How weird is that? And completely coincidence, I assure you. Coincidental, I assure you. Before it gets too warm, the entire top, The entire top of the shuttle is die-cast, as are these rather elaborate pylons. At least I think the pylons are. Yeah, the pylons are... Okay, maybe not the entire top. So it looks like this entire part, this horseshoe section, I'll say, or cotter pin, I guess, shape, that is all die-cast, as is this wing here, or yeah, this pylon, and then see, side of the pylon is a little difficult to tell, and then the nacelle is plastic. The underside here is definitely plastic, although again the pylon here is also die-cast, and I can feel the center of this stuff up here, that is also plastic as well, as is the back. So, but wow, just wow. Also has a much more elaborate landing gear setup. You've got a pair of pads, or a pair of little, I don't know, helicopter struts, I guess. And I can actually see there is an oh so slight gap underneath there. So clearly these landing pads were intended to drop down a little bit. They retract and drop. Now obviously Eaglemoss never ever ever puts moving parts onto their replicas, which is really important in a couple of cases, but in this particular case I can understand why they didn't. It's just a really narrow gap. So it's so small I'm not even going to try to show you. You might see like a brief flash of it in one frame or something like that, but just be aware, yeah, there's little landing pads here, and then on the underside there's this line right here, and then here's the third landing gear right here. It's just a strut that would stick down from the backside. As for getting on and off the shuttle, there's a pair of very curvy doors. There's one door located there, just in front of the registry number, and another one on the other side, and you can see, maybe you can see the pixels of red just above it there, which are the name of the shuttle, which again, I can't pronounce that. I don't know how to pronounce that, so whatever. But what the crap? Really, what the crap? What is this? I mean, there is nothing like this in Star Trek. It's all like all Star Trek shuttles are based around that little box that came out in 1966. None of them, and I mean none of them. Not the runabouts, not the Delta Flyer, not even the shuttle pods from Enterprise. There is nothing in Star Trek associated with Starfleet and the Federation that looks even remotely like this in terms of a shuttle. It's just, there's nothing like this. They're all based around that box, and then they just elaborate on the box with the cardboard tubes, and that's it. But none of them have wings like this. It just does not happen anywhere in canon. So, yeah, this is just, whoa. And it is vaguely UFO-ish, if I do say so myself. Which is obviously what the TOS Enterprise was. It had a UFO flying saucer on the front, and then it had some stuff behind it. Kind of rockets. Single to stage, or single stage rockets for the warp engines, and then all, kind of a fuel tank hanging out below it. Well, this is just completely not that. It's just a UFO with some rocket engines attached to it in a very, very cool way. That's what this is. So, wow. And the detail on it is pretty nice. Let's see, how many pixels can I show you? See, there's some very, very nice detail on the top there. I don't even know what this stuff is. It's just vents and grates, and it's kind of a big round thing there. I'm not entirely certain what that is. Maybe that's like the mounting point. Like you would view it from like the front or the side or the back, but you'd never see it from behind. You would never see it at like this angle traveling through space. You would never see that in the original series. You'd probably see it from the front, or yeah, you'd probably see it in profile, and then you might see like the underside as it's like traveling along. You might see something along those lines, but you'd probably rarely see it from above. In fact, that's one of the reasons why they didn't get, they could get the camera in like really close on the Enterprise. Well, kind of. But the reason why they didn't, at least on the top of the saucers, because that was where one of the mounting points for the model was. Like, usually the model was mounted from below. In fact, that's probably why the bottom side is so lacking in detail. There's just nothing there. Hey, probably because Matt Jeffries realized that. Oh, that's neat. Probably because Matt Jeffries realized that, if you're going to have a blade of armor or a blade of shielding as you're coming in for reentry, and keep in mind the show came out just 3 years before we landed on the moon, so a blade of shielding was well established at that point. He probably realized that you're going to have some sort of shielding as it's coming in for reentry. So that's why the underside would be lacking in detail. It also kind of sort of explains the shape of the wings. It's like designed to orient itself in this manner as it's coming down. So it's kind of naturally orient itself in this manner. So he's kind of thinking about that as he's designing this thing. Believe it or not, it's a very bad idea to have any kind of atmospheric craft enter the atmosphere like this. That's a very bad idea. You want to use the body and shield, or you want to use it like a giant air brake as you're coming down. That's what you want to do. So I'm suspecting that's why he went with this particular shape. Although the magazine is probably going to say otherwise. For something that never ever appeared in the original series, they're now gonna give us an 18-page magazine. Eaglemoss is gonna give us an 18-page magazine on a shuttle that has never ever ever appeared in Star Trek. Isn't even canon. It's nowhere in Star Trek. I'm not kidding. Like, I didn't know about this until like half a year ago, in the middle of a pandemic. That's when I found out about this. That's how weird this scenario is. It's like, I'm curious to find out what's so important about this shuttle that it's going to appear in here. I'm guessing that they'll have stuff related to the boxy shuttle or whatever it is eventually. But like, what on earth is in there? What the crap? I forgot to mention the paint applications are just gorgeous, typical of what you would know from Eaglemoss stuff. There's a little bit, and I mean just a little bit, of what's it called? Not flashing, but there's the tiniest bits of giveaways of mold detail or whatever it is on the underside of the nacelles. There's a very subtle line on the underside of the pylon. It's a very, very subtle line there, and I don't know if that's deliberate or not. Like, it's really subtle. It's hard to tell. Window alignment is perfect. No problem there. Window alignment is fine. And as far as I can tell, all the other details are painted up fine. I'm not seeing any sloppy details. I wish I could show you some of this, but just the engine detailing on the back. Really neat. It's very different. It's very different from anything that Star Trek has ever given us. Because again, I'll say it for like the third or fourth time, this never appeared on screen. It's not hinted at, and nobody's ever made references to it ever. So where the hell did this come from? I don't even. And there's a very subtle grill pattern of some kind along the outer edge of the nacelles. There's no detail along the inner side of the nacelles. None whatsoever. But the nacelles themselves just look like TOS Enterprise nacelles, just a lot narrower. So, okay. This feels so strange. Just I'll say an undiscovered part of Star Trek history that sat silently for 20 or what am I kidding, 55 plus years at this point. I never knew. I'm like, sure, I'll get it. Okay, whatever. I kind of wish that it had the landing pad or the landing gear on the back. I kind of wish it was covered up, but on the other hand, this probably isn't known well enough to make a different version of it that shows the landing gear. And did Jeffries even detail what the gear looks like? Actually, he might have. It might appear in that magazine. I hope it does. I really hope it does. There's not a whole lot I can say about it because Again, it never appeared in the show, so like there's no trivia, there's no nothing I can tell you about it. This might be one of my shorter Eaglemoss videos. I'll let you know when I'm done. That does not fit easily. Boy, it's really fighting this. It's not even going halfway in. Fortunately, it's not a very heavy set, so I don't have to worry about it. Matt Jeffries' original series concept shuttle. Shrug. I wonder how well this is going to stay on here. Ooh, that does not... I mean, it fits on there, but there's no friction whatsoever. None. Ooh, that's not staying on there very well at all. No. Yeah, you're going to scratch paint trying to get that on there, and it's just not... Yeah, there's no friction whatsoever. That's very loose. That's not good. That's not good at all when it doesn't have any friction whatsoever. It should have friction, but it doesn't, so... I might have mounted it a little differently, though. I have to be very careful, and I dare not tilt the nose of this thing down. I dare not. Yep, there's the Jeffries concept shuttle. So, yeah, I gotta wonder if the Romulan bird of prey was involved in that. Gotta wonder. Or rather, if they took the shape of the shuttle and, like, look at it from above and let's play around with it and see what happens. It'll be interesting to see if they do that. 50 years after Matt Jeffries designed it, his original concept for the Enterprise shuttle has been brought to life. Yeah, I've never seen anything on this shuttle until 2020, so I mean, obviously concepts must have existed out there, but that being said, yeah, it works. It actually does work. Kind of has a submarine look to it. I wonder if they were trying to go for like a voyage to the bottom of the ocean, voyage to the bottom of the sea or something along those lines. In 1966, Matt Jeffries designed a very different version of the Enterprise's shuttles that he felt was compromised when it came to building them. Darren Doctorman built the CG model based on Matt Jeffries' original designs for the Enterprise's shuttles. That's really nice. That's really nice. I do like that. I mean, it's very simple, but like I'm looking forward to the pencil sketches. That's what I'm looking for. The USS Enterprise was always meant to have shuttles, but the expense of building them caused all sorts of problems. The idea of including shuttles or any scout craft first came up when Gene Roddenberry was designing the ship with production designer Matt Jeffries. Roddenberry asked Star Trek's first consultant Harvey Lynn of the Rand Corporation for his input. One of Lynn's suggestions was that the ship was to have a bomb bay to accommodate smaller shuttles, taxis, and tugs. Jeffries designed the fantail at the back of the ship, back of the Enterprise, with exactly this in mind. Quote, "We had the large curved clamshell doors at the back of the Enterprise, and it didn't look too much different from a lot of today's modern hangars on the inside," Jeffries remembered when interviewed in 2000. Yeah, Jeffries died in the early 2000s. I don't remember exactly when. I think he saw Enterprise air. I don't remember whether he actually watched it or not. I don't know. So, out like after the original series, Jeffries might have been consulted a lot, but he never really had any input on Star Trek after the original series. I remember. Might as well bring it up now because like when else am I going to bring it up? Matt Jeffries went to the first screening of Star Trek: The Motion Picture in 1966. It was at the Smithsonian Institute is where they had or the Smithsonian Museum is where they had a special screening of it. And when he came out of the movie and he was asked what he thought of it, Jeffries pointed out, I don't have a quote, but Jeffries pointed out that he had fallen asleep during the movie. And not only that, when he was asked, well, what did you think of the updated Enterprise? And I'm paraphrasing, but I think he said something to the effect of it was boring and it was flashy and it had all kinds of interesting things on it, but like he did not give his blessings to the TMP Enterprise. He didn't care. He was uninterested. And it's kind of understandable. I mean, when you look at I kind of wish I had the Daedalus class that I had like a couple of weeks ago. But anyways, one of the things that Jeffries knew, like he was an aeronautical engineer by trade, and then he went into Hollywood. So he was bringing his aircraft engineering designs to mind when he was designing all this stuff. I mean, that's why he kind of designed this thing. Now, keep in mind, the only okay, uh, but anyways, we just had cylindrical rocket ships at the time, and truth be told, we still do at this point. Um, but Jeffries was very engineering minded, and so when he designed TOS Enterprise, the reason why it's such simple geometric shapes, with the exception of the flying saucer on the front, the reason it's just simple tubes and rounded off boxes and things like that. It's not because it was a simpler time back then, although that is a factor, but it's because engineering wise, you don't want to have a bunch of conduits exposed on the outside. You don't want to have exposed rivets and bolts and other things like that. You don't want to have those things exposed. You don't want to have, you want to have as little machinery exposed as possible. So you want to have, and if that means having a curved shape on it, then that absolutely makes sense. Even if it's never designed to enter atmosphere, even though the Enterprise did a couple of times. I think Tomorrow is Yesterday is one of the episodes where they had that. But you still want to keep it as smooth and streamlined as possible, even if it's not aerodynamic. And keep in mind that they never, in the original series, they never really cared how warp drive worked. All they know is like it looks like this and it goes like this. That's kind of all that they cared about. So what constitutes a proper shape for a warp capable ship? They didn't care. They really, really didn't care. It's just kind of something that looks iconic when it's on the screen. That's what they were looking for. And so when it says here, yeah, I was talking about when it came to Jeffrey's opinion of somebody else basically picking up the tools of God and making an updated version. Jeffrey's like he didn't care. Well, it's just typical flashy Hollywood stuff. Sounds a little familiar nowadays, doesn't it? Oh, they're all flash and there's no substance. That is effectively what Matt Jeffrey said in 1979. It's all flash and no substance. That is what he thought of the motion pictures version of the Enterprise when somebody asked his opinion. Somebody taking his design and updating it, that's what he thought. It's like it's all flash and no substance. And yeah, he fell asleep during the movie. Now, to be fair, Star Trek the Motion Picture had a very, very rocky production history, and it didn't really get huge standing ovations when it came out. But that being said, yeah, he fell asleep during the movie, so whatever. I mean, hell, he wasn't that old in '79. Give him a break. So, anyways, boy, I do not like how that fits on there. No. Quote, the Enterprise was never supposed to sit on a planet's surface, the reason they did that is because A, Lost in Space had beaten them to the punch, and B, you need, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Oh, there's the landing gear. How about that? It doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, if your ship is that big, then they would be worried about the ship folding in on itself. So it's like, no, the Enterprise. Oh, the other reason is the amount of money that they would need to produce the special effects for their ship, their fantasy ship to land on a planet would be incredibly, stupidly expensive. And so they did this in one of two ways. One, they came up with shuttles, and two, they came up with the transporter, which is you just have the actors stand there, and then you have the actors step aside, you film a blank background, and then you stick some special effects in front of it. That's how you solve your budget problem. The transporter in a nutshell. And they're also talking about it right here. And here, quoting Jeffries again, quote, "The Enterprise was never supposed to sit on a planet's surface, so we needed something other than the transporter room." Which, I think, looking at it years later, we should probably have had a shuttle like a city bus, because several times the script that came for, because several times the script came up that called for more people than we had seats for. Okay. Wow. Dude, it looks like it started out like a kind of like a helicopter is what they were like a helicopter, except instead of having struts on it, why don't I just show you the picture? So that like instead of struts, like on a helicopter, it had wheels like a landing gear coming out of it. That is cool. And here's some more down here. And again, these are concepts that would build up to that. From the beginning, it was clear that shuttles would be expensive. The first time the script called for them was The Enemy Within, a story in which the transporter malfunctions, splitting Kirk in two and stranding the landing party on a hostile planet. Enemy Within, that's the episode I was talking about earlier. Roddenberry and the writers realized that attempting to mount a rescue with a shuttle would have made perfect sense, but Sulu, the studio that made Star Trek, was unwilling to pay for the cost of building one, so any mention of a shuttle was quietly dropped. However, a few episodes later, when it came to the Galileo 7, which is the first time where you actually see a shuttle on screen, the entire story revolved around a stranded shuttlecraft. Although the script was popular with studio executives, the cost of building a shuttle meant that it was put on the back burner. Jeffries estimated that the shuttle would have taken weeks to build and that it would have cost thousands of dollars. It was clear it would be so expensive that no single episode could fund its creation, which, yeah, that is true. I mean, kind of what is it, the urban legend, even amongst truckers, even truckers kind of get this wrong. But the original series was not necessarily on a shoestring budget. If anything, it had a higher budget than your average television series at that time, because it wasn't just special effects, but you had to manufacture all the clothing, you had to manufacture all of the props, you had to manufacture all of the even chairs. You had to manufacture chairs. I mean, the captain's chair in on the bridge of the TOS Enterprise is literally an office chair that they took the bottom out of it and then they added some sides and a new back to it. You can actually see the wooden railings, the wooden armrests on the side of it. It's just an office chair that's been heavily just had a bunch of stuff added onto it. So they had to manufacture pretty much everything. There were some rare exceptions where they didn't have to, and that was usually either when they were shooting on location or something like oh, what's the one episode where they used the Guardian of Forever? It's one of the biggest episodes in the show. Is it City on the Edge of Forever? I think. Yeah. City on the Edge of Forever, where they like go back to 1930s America. That was an episode where they were able to actually use like common 1960s wardrobe and set construction and stuff like that. But that was kind of that was an exception. So it's not that Star Trek had a shoestring budget. It had a shoestring budget because they had to make from scratch so much stuff. They didn't have props that they could rent. They didn't have them at the time. They didn't have costumes that they could rent. You know, one of the good examples of this obviously being the Starship Trooper outfits or whatever it is. Those have been used. They were used. You know, they were reused in Firefly. They were reused in Power Rangers Lost Galaxy. You know, so renting out costumes for other productions is not an unthing heard of, even today. Although they've gotten kind of slightly better at it. So what they're saying here is that it was the cost of making, they might have been able to make a model for shooting, but if you wanted to do an on location shoot where you had the shuttle just sitting in the corner when you had actors going, I mean, imagine the Galileo 7 with this, where it's all rounded and streamlined, and you have to make this not just out of wood, but you have to make it out of steel. And you have to make certain that the thing can rest comfortably. And you have to make it portable, which means the wings would probably have, or the pylons would probably have to come off. And you probably have to disconnect the back half, so there'd be a huge ugly line running down the center of it. And just the way that it's molded in, this is ambitious, incredibly ambitious for 1966. With a movie, yes, they could do it. With a television series, even like Star Trek, they're saying it right here, no, they couldn't do it. And certainly making this would eat up an entire episode's budget, and they just couldn't do it. So they're saying it right here. Although the script was popular with studio executives, the cost of building a shuttle meant that it was put on the back burner. Jeffries estimated that the shuttle would take weeks to build and that it would have cost thousands. It was clear it would be so expensive that no single episode could fund its creation. That is why this shuttle, why'd you set it down? That is why this shuttle disappeared. They couldn't do it. They couldn't afford it. It's not that they couldn't make it, it's just the budget for 1 week, let alone one season, just couldn't support it. And that right there is why they couldn't do it. The solution presented itself when model maker AMT approached Desulu asking for the rights to make model kits of the Enterprise. The studio agreed on the condition that AMT provided them with a model shuttlecraft and a full exterior and interior. So Matt Jeffries set to work finally designing the shuttles. If he had had it his way, they would have looked very different to the version that eventually appeared on screen. His original plan was to design something much curvier. Quote, basically, Jeffries said, I was going to do a teardrop thing. He produced several sketches showing a rounded design with 4 landing legs that would support it on the ground. And I'm going to get completely lost in here. But I am going to keep reading the little sides. Jeffries' earliest sketches showed a very narrow, light version of the shuttle or scout craft. His idea was that both sides would roll back to reveal the interior. Oh, that's interesting. So he would have designed it, and they actually show a picture here. If you look at the forward view, where is it? Forward view is here. If you look at the forward view, I can't see what I'm doing. There's a huge line going right down the middle. This is the forward profile. There's a person here and a person here. So if you look at the forward profile, you can see that there's a line going right down the middle of it. So basically what would happen is, in order to film this thing, basically the shuttle, whatever it would eventually turn into, the shuttle would actually have a giant line, would actually have a split right down the middle. And so you could literally split it in half like an egg. Not shatter, but you could cut the thing in half, and then you could film this side of it, and then you could film this side of it. Interesting. So rather than just taking the front of the shuttlecraft set, instead of just taking it off and then sticking your camera in like that, instead you'd split the thing down the middle, and then you could film from this side, and then you could film from this side. But you would never be able to show from the front with the thing completely intact. That would be the difficult part. Jeffries' first designs were more like a helicopter than the bus that eventually was built. He hoped his shuttle design would be light enough to be moved around the sound stages in mid-air using wires. Whoa! That would have been a hell of a thing. Have it move around on wires. He actually thought they might be able to lift the thing up. Wow. There's another bit more familiar here. That's nice. That's very nice. Jeffries revised his drawings to accommodate more crewmen and to allow action inside, but the curved design was too challenging to build in the available time. Wow. Jeffries produced these drawings to show what his final design looked like. That is so ambitious. That is just incredible. Wow. Then here's the CG design that Eaglemoss came up with. And what does it say? Doctorman's model is closely modeled on Jeffries' original sketches. The shuttle was named after the Iranian astrologer forgive me if I pronounce this wrong. Albir Alberuni. Alberuni. At Mike Okuda's suggestion. Oh, Okuda had some say on this. Yeah, and you can see the landing strut sitting right there. And you can also see the separation on the pad that I told you about earlier, which is present on the Eaglemoss replica. It's just real tiny. So like I said, I'm not even going to bother showing it. It's just so small. Yep, here's the finalized shuttle. When AMT agreed to build the shuttle, they sent the work out to Gene Winfield, who commissioned this concept. Who's still alive as of the posting of this, or as of the recording of this video. Gene Winfield is still alive. Who commissioned this concept sketch from a company in San Francisco, where it was produced by Tom and Kellogg. I don't know that name. Jeffries asked for some changes to Winfield's design for the shuttle, which he recorded in this scale drawing. That looks familiar. Jeffries also produced these drawings showing the shuttle at all the necessary angles. All the different versions of the shuttle were built at Winfield's Speed and Custom Workshop. Winfield designs custom cars and stuff like that, which he was also doing at the time as well. A subsidiary of AMT that was based at Phoenix, Arizona. Jeffries helped AMT to design the interior of the shuttle, which he kept relatively simple, echoing the look of the Enterprise's helm and navigation stations. The chairs were custom made by Winfield. I've seen this picture plenty of times from the concept of the shuttle. I've seen that enough times, but I haven't seen that. Something interesting I noticed just now as I was looking at this. Obviously, they added the where am I pointing? They added the warp nacelles. Well, what we call warp nacelles. They just, power plants or whatever is what it would order. But anyways, they added the warp nacelles to this. But here's an interesting thing. I don't know the name of it, but this reminds me of a kind of a larger bus-like shuttle. I don't know what it's called, but it appeared in, I think it appeared in Next Generation. In fact, I know it appeared in Next Generation, but it also appeared in the movie Star Trek Generations and Star Trek Generations? Yeah. And it appeared in Star Trek 6. Actually, would have come from Star Trek 6, now that I think about it. And then it would also have appeared, might have appeared in Voyager. I think it would have been the USS Raven, I think. But anyways, Eaglemoss has produced a shuttlecraft set, of which I already have two, and I'll link the descriptions for those below. There's two shuttlecraft sets that I've purchased, and one of those, not the ones that I have, but Eaglemoss produced another set that has the shuttle. That I'm thinking of, which I don't know the name of. I don't know the class off the top of my head. So anyways, that's what this reminds me of. And I'm like, oh, is that where they got the idea from? Looking at this picture. It's just TOS Shuttlecraft without the nacelles and pylons attached to it. Wouldn't it be interesting if that was true? What? Jeffries was never very happy with the finished design of the shuttle, and he would occasionally doodle alternative designs that could be used on the surface of a planet. What is this taxi thing? It's like a hover truck, it's like a hovering flatbed truck. I've never seen that before. Obviously, that was never made in the show. Here's another one. Wow. Look at that. Jeffries had always intended the fantail at the back of the Enterprise to be the doors to the shuttle bay or hangar deck. It was only now that he worked out the details of what inside would look like. So he designed the shuttle bay after the series came out. Jeffries gave his scale drawings to Richard Dayton, who built a 1/12 scale model of the hangar bay that could be used to film the visual effects. Turntable elevator. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Jeffries was keen to design something that was light enough to create the illusion of flight on soundstage by using wires. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Oh my gosh, look at all these. Many of Jeffries' designs were for small auxiliary vehicles that could have been used if we had ever seen the Enterprise in space dock. None of them were produced in response to a particular script, and Jeffries described them as noodling designs to inspire the writers. Wow! Now that one I've seen before, but wow! Now these are just doodles. They're not finalized in any way, shape, or form. But wow, I had no idea. I thought that was the original design for the TOS shuttle. I had no idea. So yeah, I've seen that picture before, but all these others, I had no idea. And again, I like, yeah, there were obviously concepts, but I had no idea that he produced this amount of work. Kind of glad these didn't happen because they're very, even more so. Like, even though these are concepts, they do look like they're very dated. These would not have dated well if Star Trek was to continue. He's leaning on the UFO kind of aspect of them, and I think that would have worked against Star Trek if most of these had shown up later on. So I suppose in that regard, even though Jeffries didn't like the appearance of, oh, is that it? That might be it. That is it. Even though Jeffries might not have liked the final boxy shuttle design, and yeah, I can't really say I blame him. I mean, considering what he came up with, I can't really say I blame him for his disappointment. For his disappointment, mind you. A lot of these designs look very 1960s compared to the, the concepts that like even the concept of the Enterprise itself, the Daedalus class, for example, that is not particularly dated. It's not dated to the 1960s necessarily. An argument can be made in favor of it because, well, it was designed in the 60s. But compared to the Daedalus class, these are dated because it's all UFOs with peculiar flying saucer or peculiar landing gear on them, and we're not, So I think, hindsight being 2020, 55 plus years later, I think it's good that these were not used for the finalized design of the shuttlecraft. I think there would have been, these are dated. These are, oh, come on, another UFO. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So while I like this, just personally, I like the appearance of this, like, wow, a lost piece of Star Trek history. That being said, with the evolution of Star Trek, it's interesting how these would not have looked good 55 plus years later, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that these are bad. I'm just saying they are dated, and that can make a difference. That can make a difference. And I pointed it out in when I unboxed the Daedalus class. Like, it's just a sphere and some cylinders. You had to do something different. Actually, there's a lot. It's nothing but a sphere and a bunch of cylinders coming out of it, and that's it. So I don't think, and it says it right here. Many of Jeffries' designs were for small auxiliary vehicles that could have been used if we had ever seen the Enterprise in space dock, which we never did. We saw it in orbit around a space station or two, but we never saw any craft of any kind, so that's interesting. Wow. These look very 1960s. I'm not gonna. I mean, these look dated compared to most of the other things that came out of the original series. Yeah, those are very dated. It's almost like it's almost like the generic box doesn't date as badly. I mean, it might be uninteresting to look at. I don't have the TOS Shuttlecraft because there's others in the Eaglemoss Shuttlecraft said, I don't want that one. Um, but, like, well, I kind of do. Kind of. Ooh, be very careful. Kind of. This is about as close as I can get to TOS Shuttlecraft. This is the Galileo from Star Trek V. This is about as close as I can get to making a comparison. It's almost better that this is a box with a rounded nose, obviously, and obviously this is a version of the shuttle. This is an evolved version of it, But that being said, I think kind of a slanted hexagonal box actually turned out for the better in the long run because it's not dated by being a flying saucer. It's not a flying saucer. And it makes slightly more practical sense to have it like this rather than to have a bunch of bubble dome or bubble cockpits and anti-gravs that are rounded off or whatever it is. And I think exactly the same thing could be said of Star Wars. There are no that I'm aware of. There are no flying saucers in Star Wars. With an argument, the obvious trace being the Millennium Falcon. But that being said, there's so few, and they don't have those rounded. They have rounded cockpits, yes, but they're not dating themselves by being what Jeffries is showing here. You know, so I think the advantage of having a boring box is that a boring box doesn't date that much because you can kind of cut off. I mean, if you can imagine this like a wood block or clay or something like that, yeah, you're going to have straight edges initially in the 1960s, but then you can carve off those edges and make it slanted, and then you end up with something like this curving nose. Well, yeah, actually, because the TOS shuttle it was just a sharp edge like this, and there was a sharp edge. And then the updated version they did in the late 80s, this version is rounded. And the versions for next generation, they're rounded off as well. So Jeffries might not have been happy with the end results, but the weird thing about it is it actually turned out for the better. That's not to say that Jeffries was wrong. It's just that it's kind of convenient. It's convenient that Jeffries was wrong. So that's kind of how I view it. Oh, I'm going to look forward to digging into this. I'm kind of glad that they have pictures of the finalized TOS shuttle in here. I'm glad they have that in here. Not just to acknowledge it, but like the compare and contrast. Because if it had been just the concept sketches, I don't think this would have had the impact. So I'm glad that Eaglemoss. Huh. I'm glad that Eaglemoss provided information on the finalized TOS shuttle. Even with this concept sketch here, Jeffrey's design, or the finalized Eaglemoss, is different from the concept that's showing here. Because one difference is that, oh, okay, there's a couple of differences, but one of them is that I'll say this outer pylon here is curved. Trying to show it to you best as I can. It's got this weird kind of S curve to whatever it is, but this concept sketch, it's straight. So that right there is a difference. Although the outer pylon does curve backwards appropriately. That is done correctly. So another difference is that these how do I do this? This line, kind of a dark line or whatever it is, that is much more pronounced in this concept sketch. It's almost like the TMP Enterprises warp field grill. If you look at that, it kind of looks like that in this sketch here. So it's entirely possible that these drawings have been around for 50 plus years, and Eaglemoss is the very first one to produce a physical version of it, which I can believe. I can believe that. But they're also probably the first to produce an actual CG model of it. So yeah, he just started from a helicopter and worked his way up from there. Wow. What was it I said 40 minutes ago? I thought this was going to be one of my shorter Eaglemoss unboxings. Eh, I've been going for almost an hour. Well, it's not going to edit for that long, but still, that's a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. So I guess this is going to end up being its own video, which is not at all what I thought it was going to. Cool. Very cool. And of course, this is obviously up to personal interpretation whether you like this or not. I'm not saying if you're a tricker you have to like this, but just in my personal opinion, my personal opinion, yeah, this is not bad. It has a couple of nice angles to it. If you filmed it today, it has some interesting angles to it. I kind of hope that a future version of Star Trek picks up on this and they try and do something with this at some point. That would be nice. Cool. Okay. And so with that, this is AV Unit 4A saying thank you very much for tuning in.